Hello and welcome to St. Matthew's Anglican Church. This is Noon Renewal for the 21st of July. I want to talk today a bit about a clergy conference I attended very early in my ordained ministry when Father Henry Nouwen was the main speaker. This was here in the Diocese of Toronto, and Henry was acting at that point as the pastor for the large community in Richmond Hill. Although he was working on his current book at the time, we didn't know that he would use that book as the basis of his series of 3 talks with us. The book in question became The Return of the Prodigal and was a study of that well-known parable of the prodigal son through the lens of Rembrandt's famous painting based on it. He'd encountered a poster of that painting in the L'Arche community in France, where he was currently seeking guidance for his future ministry. He'd been struck by the painting to such an extent that it really brought the parable to life for him. Over the next period of his life, he focused reflectively on that parable and even had an opportunity to see the original Rembrandt painting at the Hermitage Gallery in St. Petersburg, Russia. The talks at our clergy conference explored the story of the prodigal homecoming through the eyes of the 3 main characters of the story, the 2 brothers and the father. In each of his 3 talks, Nouwen invited us as members of the audience to find within ourselves the younger brother, then the elder brother, and finally the waiting father. First, Nouwen asked us each to discover within ourselves those qualities that made us like the younger son, and to think about how that might affect our ability to minister. At this point in his life, the younger son had lost touch with the one who loved him and instead decided to go it alone in life. Farthest fields had become more attractive, and the younger son wanted to leave behind his home. He wanted to take his inheritance and fulfill his own desires, free from the responsibility of being the son. I'm sure we can each recall that restlessness in our own lives. The supremacy of self-interest had overtaken our best instincts. Self had taken charge of the son's destiny. We were invited by Nouwen to consider what part of us was similar, allowing ourselves to be the most important factor, even at the risk of losing what actually mattered most. The resulting brokenness and desolation, and you know the story is very familiar, made the younger son question his diminished circumstances and long for home and sonship again. The pig pen turned out to be a false dream. So he decided to return to his father's home, even if it was to be no more than a servant. Nouwen then invited us to look at the elder son and find him in our lives and experiences as well. The so-called faithful son was beset by resentment for the return of his brother and the subsequent celebration. He asked why he had never been given the fatted lamb, fine clothes, and fancy rings. Was there a part of us, Nouwen asked, as faithful clergy or as followers of Jesus, that we might resent our circumstances? Did we feel disregarded and even used? Were we feeling undervalued and doing our duty without feeling valued for it? Did we feel taken for granted for our faithfulness? Or did we feel trapped by our own discipleship? Maybe, and this is certainly probably was true in that room of clergy, maybe our calling had disappointed us or not been what we'd hoped for. The 3rd talk directed our attention to the infinite compassion and unconditional love of the Father, who gladly reclaimed his son and welcomed him home. It was unparalleled joy that the Father displayed in embracing the lost son and the way in which he called for celebration because the one who was lost had been found. Forgiveness and embrace and a welcome return home was what the Father offered the Son, without judgment, in spite of the fact that the Son expected it, or recrimination. That was the mark of the waiting Father. And that was what Nouwen told us as clergy, as he would for disciples. That must be at the heart of our own ministry and discipleship. We should each seek to be like the Father in how we minister and live out our discipleship. That's how we will be authentic and effective, like the Father, Nouwen said. Nouwen's eventual published book was a very personal odyssey into his own journey and vocation, and there is much more in it than I've recounted in this presentation of his talk to 300 clergy. But it does invite us all as Jesus followers, as it did a roomful of clergy, to explore and evaluate our own discipleship and to seek to be like the Father who awaits and celebrates the return home of the lost. That, after all, is how we participate in God's mission in the world. Amen.